Hey, everybody. It is Thursday, December 4th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. And Jill, we found out yesterday just how many of you are letting us read between the lines so you don't have to.
That's right. Spotify released its end of the year wrapped lists on Wednesday. And we found out Mo News appeared as the number one listened to podcast for more than 6,000 people. And we have over 1 million plays this year. So truly, thank you. We appreciate it.
Very much so. We should note that Spotify only accounts for just under a third of our listenership. The vast majority of you, interestingly, listen on Apple Podcasts. And Apple, we'd like you to really, include podcasts in your Wrapped competitor next year so we can get a better gauge on this. But we really appreciated all of you tagging us in your wraps, posting them on Instagram. Jill, we found out people that are in our top 1% of listeners who listened to 9,000 minutes of us last year. Jill, late on Wednesday, someone tagged us who listened to more than 10,000 minutes of us last year. I'm not sure I can listen to 10,000 minutes of us, but appreciate all of you who have. And one of the things that was so great to see is Spotify sent us our own internal Wrapped numbers, statistics, on how our podcast did last year. And it was great to see that listening time up 68% in 2025 over 2024, and followers on Spotify up by 55% this year. So appreciate the growth, appreciate all of you sharing your Wrapped, telling the world about the Mo News podcast, and just slightly above the Mo News podcast, Jill, in listenership. Some stats are out on music. Bad Bunny, the most streamed artist globally. People listen to slightly more minutes of Bad Bunny than the Mo News podcast. Notably,
just
Bad
slightly,
Bunny, just by like a few billion minutes. Bad Bunny dethroning Taylor Swift, who was the number one artist in 2024. Bad Bunny in 2025. Globally, but among U.S. listeners, Taylor Swift still number one for the second straight year.
So Spotify has been doing this, coming out with these wrapped lists every year since 2015. It's a brilliant marketing move, I have to say, on Spotify's part. But they introduced this new feature this year. Everyone on Spotify is going to know what we're talking about, where they guess your age based on your listening habits and what you're listening to.
They're very precise. They called it your listening age.
Okay, so for some reason, everyone on our editorial team had the listening tastes of a 65-plus-year-old. And that is only really funny because the average age of our editorial team is what, 30?
Yeah, right around there.
Okay. And Moshe, I was a little bit shocked. I know I'm an old soul. My listening age, 100 years old. Literally 100.
What do you like, listen to swing music?
So it said you've been listening to a lot of music from the 30s, as in the 1930s. And I believe that it is referring to Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead. So my daughter was in, my daughter was in The Wizard of Oz.
Is from the 1930s.
Yes, and she was a munchkin. So we listened to that song a lot on repeat, and it's only about a minute long, so you can kind of lose yourself to it. But still, Taylor Swift and others were my top artists, so I don't totally get the formula.
Listen, this is why you can't be too worried about AI yet. They're still like, hey, you feel like based on your listening habits, you might be 100 years old because you listen to Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead repeatedly, which is from the 1930s. Some people who listen to a lot of classical music, Jill, like Beethoven and Mozart, are being told that their listening age was like 400 years old because, music from the 17th
Are you
century.
1,000?
Have you lived 500 years? Because you love Mozart.
All right, Moshe, let's get to the headlines. An immigration crackdown begins in both New Orleans and Minnesota, but why they could look a bit different from previous ICE surges around the country. We'll also have some major headlines from the world of tech and the future of AI. From the New York Times DealBook conference, Moshe, you were there on Wednesday.
Yes, a number of major political leaders and tech leaders will have the headlines.
The latest Trump pardon involves a Democratic congressman. It is a move that has shocked some of his fellow Republicans on Capitol Hill. And RFK Jr.'s new vaccine advisory committee could vote today on changing vaccine requirements for infants.
Yeah, they're specifically looking at the hepatitis B vaccine. We'll tell you what the controversy is all about.
Meanwhile, President Trump announcing plans yesterday to lower fuel efficiency requirements. And sticking with cars, Waymo's self-driving cars are suddenly behaving like New York City Cabbies, for better or worse.
Just to be clear, driving like the Cabbies, but still the Waymo spell much nicer than a New York City cab.
And Moshe is on this day in history.
Big day in music history. Jill, the clue is, allow me to reintroduce myself.
My name is Ho. All right.
She got it.
All right, the Trump administration launched some new immigration enforcement operations in New Orleans, Louisiana, and Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota on Wednesday, in its latest crackdown across Democratic-run cities coast to coast. But Moshe, it is like a tale of two regions. Starting in New Orleans, the Department of Homeland Security dubbed the stepped-up immigration enforcement operation Catahoula Crunch. DHS says it will target, quote, criminal aliens, although previous operations have also targeted people without criminal records. About 250 agents will reportedly be sent to the Mississippi and Louisiana region. The goal, they say, is to arrest about 5,000 people, more than in recent operations in Chicago or Charlotte. Louisiana's Republican governor, Jeff Landry, says he is welcoming the plan with open arms. He says, quote, this is going to run until we get them all off the street. The them he is referring to are people with criminal records. But Democratic leaders in New Orleans, less enthusiastic. They are warning the feds not to violate anyone's rights. DHS is blaming sanctuary city policies. And like we've seen in other places the feds have targeted, in areas that have large Hispanic populations, some people have gone into hiding and some businesses are shutting down.
Yeah, the feds here say that, at least in the New Orleans raids, they're looking for undocumented migrants accused of serious crimes who have been released from jail in the past. You have the case here where you have that Republican governor, but then, of course, New Orleans is a blue city within a red state. You've seen sort of the same situation play out in Memphis, a blue city in the red state of Tennessee. So we'll see how things unfold in Louisiana. But one thing we do know is the raids up in Minneapolis could be pretty contentious. This situation is unfolding there where the Minneapolis Police Department says they will not be cooperating with federal immigration authorities, and they believe that in many cases that they're specifically unnecessarily targeting the Somali immigrant community in Minneapolis. We should mention that the largest expat community of Somalis in the world, or at least one of them, happens to live in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, nearly 100,000 of them. And they've been the focus in recent weeks, especially as there have been multiple reports about a $1 billion fraud scheme. We told you about it on the podcast earlier this week, involving Minnesota's social programs over the last few years. And it is a case tied to several dozen individuals in the Somali American community who were basically taking advantage of various government programs and defrauding it to the tune of $1 billion plus. So you have heard a lot of talk from the White House, specifically about the Somali American community there. They don't have specific numbers on how many of them are now citizens. Remember, a lot of them came in the aftermath of the civil war in Somalia in the 90s, many of them settling there. One of the reasons that they settled there was because of the social safety net in Minnesota. Well, Trump now appears to be sending in immigration authorities there, not just looking for undocumented migrants, but people also in the process of citizenship. This is something we've seen in recent days, especially in light of that shooting last week where the Afghan national shot National Guard troops, killing one in D.C., and they've frozen asylum proceedings for a number of countries, including for Somali Americans. Trump has also threatened to end temporary protected status for about 700 Somali immigrants. Trump posting on Truth Social about that, saying, quote, Somali gangs are terrorizing the people of that great state of Minnesota and billions of dollars are missing. Send them back to where they came from. It's over. Exclamation point. He also has been claiming that Somali-born residents contribute nothing to the economy and citing a whole number of statistics. There's also an investigation going on in light of that fraud scheme with federal authorities looking into whether any of the money that was defrauded and sent back to Somalia actually ended up in the hands of one of the terrorist groups there, Al-Shabaab, which is associated with Al-Qaeda. So there's a lot happening at the same time. There's the immigration raids we've been seeing across the country, but specifically here in Minneapolis, you can't separate it from the fraud headlines that have come out. And the very extreme language the president has been using when it comes to that community there, the mayor of Minneapolis warning that up to 100 federal agents will be arriving in the city. And again, they will not be assisting federal authorities in their immigration enforcement efforts.
And then there's the focus on Governor Tim Walz. He has been under a ton of scrutiny, with critics questioning how $1 billion of taxpayer money got stolen under his watch. He was on NBC's Meet the Press this past weekend. He tried to explain it as saying it is because Minnesota is generous, prosperous, and such a well-run state that it attracts criminals. But critics are saying that that defense doesn't really add up. Walz is now trying for a third term as governor, and he's going to have a lot of competition. Republican Minnesota House Speaker Lisa DeMuth is running against him. She has accused him of raising taxes while letting, quote, fraud run wild.
And then things will be getting even more interesting, Jill, because on Wednesday, among those who filed to run for governor of Minnesota is Mike Lindell. My Pillow, the My Pillow guy and founder, is looking to be the next governor of Minnesota for the Republican Party. Lindell, of course, famously, infamously, has been a huge supporter of Trump's bankrolling part of the effort in 2020 to overturn the election. Now, he has filed the documents. He says it isn't 100% certain whether he will run, but I will remind you that Minnesota is also the state that gave us a pro wrestler as governor, Jesse the Body Ventura. Some of you might remember that, especially if you're from Minnesota, sort of entering the modern era of celebrity chief executives. And so wouldn't be completely out of the normal, but given where Lindell's politics are and where the state is, it might be difficult for him to win statewide, but certainly would make for a very interesting Republican primary race. Nonetheless, Minnesota receiving a lot of scrutiny now. Tim Walz getting a lot of questions right now. And it is against that backdrop that you see the president now aiming his immigration enforcement at the state.
Okay, now to a number of headlines in tech, AI, and politics made Wednesday at the annual New York Times DealBook Summit. It is a conference annually hosted by journalist Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tech leaders, governors, billionaires are unusually candid about politics, risk, and the future of the global economy. One of the major themes this year was AI. We are almost 3 years exactly after ChatGPT launched, revolutionizing the way the world thinks about and uses AI. The arms race is bigger than ever, perhaps too big. Leaders from BlackRock's Larry Fink to the president of Taiwan to Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei were asked about the state of the AI industry and the potential for an AI bubble, certainly a hot topic in Silicon Valley and on Wall Street over the past few months. So, Moshe, you were at the conference on Wednesday. What did these leaders have to say?
So it was very interesting, Jill, because this area, AI, is moving so quickly, right? And it affects so many aspects of the economy. They were even talking about its deflationary impact yesterday, as in if AI takes a whole bunch of jobs from people, that could then lead to higher unemployment, which could then lead to lower prices. So, funny enough, as you think about the economy, you're thinking about, well, how do we fight inflation? AI could help in some ways, but it also will hurt in some ways in terms of employment. Then there's how it's utilized in various aspects of society. But in the meantime, the central focus yesterday was who's going to win the race, right? OpenAI, heavily involved in this. Google, heavily involved in this. Microsoft, Meta, involved in this. One of the people you mentioned who was there, Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei, they have Claude. They're worth hundreds of billions of dollars as a company. And they're all spending really huge sums of money right now at a time where most of them are not making a profit. Anthropic is investing $50 billion in new data centers. And that was one of the key questions yesterday, which is ultimately, like, what are you guys doing with all that money? And what's the risk associated with all of that? And he was, candid. He's like, listen, we don't get this right, we go bankrupt. But ultimately, it is a race right now between him in particular. You have OpenAI, Jill, this week, Sam Altman, very concerned about the strides Google has made, declaring a, quote, red alert for his company. So they're spending a huge amount. Amodei referring to that company as YOLOing, like you only live once. That's how much money they're spending. He says, we don't have to do code reds over here at Anthropic. But that's the thing we're going to keep watching here is how all these companies keep updating their models. For a while it was ChatGPT. ChatGPT was becoming like the Google for AI, right? But I'm going to ChatGPT that. Now, ultimately, Google, after declaring their own version of a red alert in the last couple of years, has come out with some new models that are very impressive. In particular, if you guys have tried out the Nano Banana AI model for photos and videos, hyper realistic, scary in terms of how realistic they are, making the stuff that ChatGPT is putting out recently not look so great. So OpenAI in that race. In this case, we heard from Anthropic yesterday saying, they can't afford to spend too little. They can't afford to spend too much. They got to figure out the Goldilocks amount of spending for themselves.
And then to politics, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent saying that even if President Trump loses a major Supreme Court case on tariffs, they've got a backup plan. California Governor Gavin Newsom also there, taking aim at some business leaders in the room who he feels have cozied up too much to Trump. And then you had Palantir's Alex Karp defending his often criticized company regarding privacy and surveillance and his views on the administration. So Moshe, walk us through it.
All right, let's start with the Treasury Secretary yesterday, who made some news, first for admitting, Jill, that he says he was wrong on tariffs. He has been a longtime critic of tariffs. He worked in finance for many years. But Bessent saying yesterday, you know what? Trump turned out to be right about all of this. Tariffs, especially his extreme tariffs, his 100% tariffs, 150% tariffs, actually gives us a great amount of leverage and is a great tool. So not surprising to hear from a Trump cabinet secretary, praise for the president. But, ultimately here, Bessent and Sorkin got into it a little bit. And interestingly, you don't often hear from people in finance, whether you're a liberal economist or conservative economist, tariffs have always been, pretty unpopular. But to hear Bessent try to explain why he thinks it's a valuable tool was super interesting. Speaking of tariffs, we know we're watching very closely. The Supreme Court's going to be ruling on the majority of Trump's tariffs, whether they were constitutionally imposed, whether they legally used a certain law to impose many of them. Well, Bessent saying yesterday that even if the Supreme Court overturns the tariffs, there are other rules and other laws they can use to revive them. So they're actually pretty confident that the hit that is perceived they will take if the Supreme Court overturns the tariffs won't be that bad because they have a backup plan. So we heard from Bessent there on Plan B. As for Gavin Newsom, he it feels very good right now as he looks ahead to a potential 2028 presidential run as he finishes his time as governor of California. And he talked a lot about his shtick as he's been opposing Trump, basically mimicking Trump. Right now, Jill, among other things, if you follow his X account, he very much sounds like Trump. He, all caps, exclamation points, insults, a whole variety of things. He also has a merch line, Jill, that includes knee pads for CEOs aimed at business leaders, he said, have bent the knee to Trump. And then he called out people in the crowd, not specifically, but saying, hey, there's some of you in the crowd that might need to buy a bunch of these knee pads for the way that you have been acquiescing to things at the White House. So Newsom, super aggressive there, but he feels it is to his benefit. And, he repeatedly said, what we're seeing here is not normal. You can have your criticisms of Democrats, but ultimately he believes that what we're seeing from the Trump administration when it comes to corruption, grift, as he referred to it, is at a level we haven't seen before. And he believes that the only way to get people to take it seriously is by talking like Trump in order to reveal to folks, does this seem normal to you? And then finally, there was Alex Karp of Palantir. Palantir, super controversial company. They have systems for predictive analytics, software, powerful software that allows law enforcement around the world and governments around the world to surveil people, to analyze data. And the concern among many folks is that it allows for racial profiling and the tracking of citizens. And so he pushed back on all of it, saying we're ethical and there's a lot of bad reporting out there about us. And he went through it extensively. So I would suggest if you're looking for more details on that, definitely give the Alex Karp remarks a Google. He's a fascinating character, Jill. Palantir, super controversial again, but he stands by the way that they're approaching how they sell their software to governments, saying like any technology, it can be used for both good and people can use it for bad. But he, again, believes that they are approaching things ethically.
Okay, time for the speed read from Axios. President Trump on Wednesday announced that he is granting a full and unconditional pardon to a member of Congress. The headline here is that it's a Democrat. Texas Representative Henry Cuellar, he and his wife were indicted in May of 2024, accused of accepting nearly $600,000 in bribes in exchange for influencing U.S. foreign policy in favor of Azerbaijan and a Mexican bank. Trump, in a post on Truth Social, said the Biden administration had, quote, weaponized the justice system and prosecuted Cuellar because he, quote, bravely spoke out against the Biden border catastrophe. He writes, because of these facts and others, I am hereby announcing my full and unconditional pardon of beloved Texas Congressman Henry Cuellar. The president added that he will also pardon his wife, Imelda, as well. Trump attached to the post a letter from the Cuellar's daughters pleading for clemency for their parents, calling them honest individuals and good, decent people. Cuellar saying in a post on X that he wanted to thank President Trump for his tremendous leadership. He says the decision clears the air and lets us move forward for South Texas.
So while we know that Trump is definitely leaning in to his pardoning powers, the vast majority of them have been used for Republicans or people that are seen as very friendly to the administration. It is rare for a Republican president to pardon a sitting Democratic member of Congress. Jill, we're told that Speaker Mike Johnson, the Republican Speaker of the House, was not told about this pardon in advance. He found it out from the headlines, according to several reports. And this is a headache for Republicans because they were actually looking to win Cuellar's seat. Now, it's not to say that they can't win the seat against him, but certainly the pardon here and, the president saying that, all the allegations and charges against Cuellar are nonsense. Those were things that the Republicans were trying to use against Cuellar to win his seat in Texas. This is one of the, couple dozen very competitive districts. Cuellar notably yesterday filing to run again in next year's midterms. But even with the pardon from a Republican president, Cuellar says he remains a Democrat.
And Moshe, for anyone who is keeping score at home, President Trump has now pardoned 12 members of Congress, 10 Republicans and 2 Democrats. All but Cuellar had been convicted.
Yes, the most recent one before that was George Santos, and this runs between his first administration and his second term.
George Santos, never heard of him. From the Associated Press, a federal vaccine advisory committee this week is talking about whether newborns should still get the hepatitis B vaccine. Federal health recommendations currently suggest all babies be vaccinated against that liver infection in their first day of life. But U.S. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s committee is expected to change that. The move contradicts previous public health advice. Despite what the Vaccine Advisory Committee may say, the American Academy of Pediatrics says they will continue to recommend the vaccine because they say the evidence shows that it saves lives. Hepatitis B is a serious liver infection that for most people lasts less than 6 months, but for some, especially infants and children, it can become a long-lasting problem that can lead to liver failure and liver cancer. In adults, the virus is spread through sex or through sharing needles during injection drug use, but it can also be passed from an infected mother to a baby. As many as 90% of infants who contract hepatitis B go on to have chronic infections, meaning their immune systems never completely clear the virus.
So back in 1991, federal health officials determined that all newborns should receive their first dose of the Hep B vaccine within 24 hours of their birth, which can block the virus from taking hold if transmitted during delivery. In particular, it's a concern among those who are drug abusers that the baby could get it as the delivery is taking place. And since 91, if you look at about 30 years of data going into 2022, case rates of Hep B have declined by more than 99%. Now, parents can opt out of the shots, but many daycare centers, school districts do require proof of Hep B vaccination for enrollment. But you have some pushback here, including from some new members of the vaccine committee. Remember, RFK basically fired everyone on the vaccine committee. He brought new people in. He has one pediatric cardiologist who is now on the committee who says that a vaccine given on day 1 of life has a risk of a neonatal fever, which can cause more interventions. So that in some cases, you shouldn't require it for everybody because there could be negatives, downsides here for babies they don't believe needed if their parents aren't drug abusers or know for a fact that they don't have Hep B. At the same time, there has been a review recently of more than 400 studies that found no evidence that the birth dose of the vaccines causes any short or long-term health problems. So while you have some of these new vaccine folks who are friends with RFK Jr. or have similar viewpoints to him, a study shows that some of their concerns, the data doesn't bear out at this point. And in fact, they believe that the benefits have been huge here with the Hep B vaccine, that it has prevented more than 6 million infections and 1 million hospitalizations over the last few years. Now, we will watch for those results of the vaccine committee's meeting today. Check that out on our Instagram page. They could vote to eliminate the Hep B shot. They could also vote to just delay the first dose. Instead of having it within the first 24 hours, they could push it back to like the first month or the second month of life. So we'll look out for their final decision here. Remember, when the committee first met, the new committee met in September. Some of them had no experience on the committee. There was a lot of confusion. So they ended up postponing a decision on this, among other topics, until now.
From NBC News, the White House on Wednesday said that it will weaken fuel efficiency requirements for tens of millions of new cars and light trucks. Those new requirements were instituted during the Biden administration. Trump met in the Oval Office with the heads of the big three automakers, the president claiming the changes will save Americans $109 billion over 5 years and shave about $1,000 off the average cost of a new car. The Biden administration's stricter efficiency standards were designed to get more Americans to go electric, but Trump said that instead they forced automakers to build cars using expensive technologies that drove up costs and prices. The average new vehicle price in October surged to an all-time high above $50,000 for the first time ever, according to Kelley Blue Book.
Now, it's not clear how much of this increase is actually attributed to those new Biden fuel efficiency standards, especially in light of recent inflation, which we'll get to here in a second. But first, the background on all of this. Transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gases in the U.S. Of course, these greenhouse gases have been proven to lead to climate change. And so during the Biden administration, they went with a carrot and stick approach where they basically tried to offer tax credits to motorists to buy electric cars. Some of you may have benefited from that. At the same time, they tried to put more of these stringent fuel efficiency standards on automakers. Now, those new standards, implementing them and innovating around them did cost billions of dollars to the automakers. Now, the plan that was announced yesterday will require automakers to achieve an average of 35 miles a gallon by the year 2031 in all cars and light trucks, so sometime in the next 5 years. But the Biden standards, well, they were demanding 50 miles per gallon. And so, again, Trump taking it just under 35 miles per gallon. The big issue for automakers is this sense of whiplash that Biden imposes these standards, then Trump comes in and takes away certain standards. They've already had to invest a whole bunch of money to try to get up to those standards. And then on top of that, the big concern among automakers is the tariffs. Remember, the average car, even American-made cars or foreign-made cars, some of them have parts from multiple countries. Some of them, as they're being put together, they might begin to be put together in Canada, then they come to the U.S., then they go back to Canada, or vice versa with Mexico, U.S., back to Mexico, back to the U.S. And so that deals with a lot of tariffs. Also, cars have a lot of parts. Those parts come from all over the place. And so the tariffs have hit them hard, in addition to having already spent the money on the Biden fuel efficiency standards. So we'll see what comes of this and how much of a benefit Americans see when they buy their next car. Remember, the price of everything, a big issue heading into the midterm elections, and certainly Trump getting a lot of scrutiny from voters who elected him last year on the promise of lowering prices, and yet prices continue to go up.
Staying with transportation, from the Wall Street Journal, Waymo's driverless cars, once known for extreme caution, are starting to display unexpectedly human traits, with some passengers saying they're acting more like aggressive Uber or taxi drivers, for better or worse. In San Francisco and other cities, passengers and pedestrians report sharper accelerations, faster lane changes, and in some cases, outright rule bending. Police in San Bruno, California recently pulled over a Waymo after it made an illegal U-turn. That is a scenario that would have seemed improbable a year ago. So
hold on. So it's improbable, like in the entire history of humanity. Imagine this, like the police pulling over the car and then there's no driver in the car, right? Like, sir, license and registration, please. And it's a driverless car, and there's probably just a passenger in the back being like, I didn't tell it to I didn't tell it to do a U-turn. So the whole scenario, totally improbable for the majority of human history, but improbable specifically also because, well, Waymo was these cars were following the rules to a T until recently.
Right. So Waymo acknowledges that it made some software updates so that its driverless cars are more what they are calling confidently assertive. And they say that's a response to practical realities of dense streets where overcautious vehicles can become disruptive. For example, the company says a Waymo car might need to cross over a double yellow line to get around a truck that might be double parked. And they say moving with the flow of traffic does require judgment. That can't always mean strict rule following.
I like that term, officer. I was being confidently assertive. Okay. But as we know, as you just laid out, the double park scenario, right? Like you're driving down the street, there's one lane on each side, someone's double parked, you got to go over the double yellow line in order to get around that car. And that car could be double parked for 2 minutes or it could be double parked for 20 minutes. And until recently, if you were taking a Waymo or one of these other self-driving cars, the Waymo's just sitting there, right? Because the Waymo is programmed to follow the rules. And so then you're just stuck. And you're just like, you just go around, there's no oncoming traffic, yada, yada, yada. So they've tried to loosen stuff up to make things more realistic. But that does worry folks, this creeping aggression, they call it. In one instance, a Waymo driverless car accidentally killed a beloved neighborhood cat, according to the article. But companies like Waymo still assert, if you look at their track record, that their safety record still far, far stronger than human drivers. Remember, about 40,000 Americans every year are killed in traffic accidents. Millions are injured in traffic accidents. A lot of that is due to distracted driving, drunk driving, and that's not a problem with driverless cars, right? They don't deal with fatigue. They don't deal with distraction. And so when you look at the data here, as difficult it is for sort of us to get our heads around it, these self-driving cars ultimately will make us safer, but certainly getting there still a challenge. And they're going to have to find this right way to dial up the car where, again, the robotaxi doesn't sit there for 20 minutes behind a double parked car, but also isn't just like swerving and doing crazy things and killing the neighborhood cat in the process. The fundamental question here at the end of the day, Jill, that we're facing with AI and a lot of technology, how human should we let the robots become?
Moshe, I'll ponder that and get back to you.
A big thought on this Thursday morning.
But there was a funny quote in the Wall Street Journal article about someone who said that they were watching two of the exact same cars zigzagging back and forth in between two lanes in a tunnel that like no one ever changes lanes in. I don't even think you're supposed to change lanes. So obviously these Waymos are just getting a bit more daring.
Right. They dialed up the Waymo to like 17-year-old like male driver. And like, we need to dial
what are you
back
training this on?
I kid. I know they take the safety thing very seriously. All right, now time for On This Day in History. We begin about 900 years ago today. Adrian IV was elected Pope. He became the only Englishman to ever occupy the papal throne. Of course, it comes just after last year, Jill, when we got our first American to become Pope. In between there, we had several hundred Italian and German popes. On this day in 1791, folks waking up in London got to enjoy the first ever Sunday newspaper. The Observer in London, which still publishes today, published its first Sunday edition, Jill. The Sunday paper, always, I have warm feelings about a Sunday newspaper.
I agree, until I had kids and I never read a Sunday paper again.
They just stacked up. They just stacked up and you could use the paper to wrap gifts.
I had high hopes, but
we all have high hopes. On this date in 1991, speaking of high hopes, Pan Am Airlines, once the largest airline in America, ceased to exist on this day in 1991. You might have, if you're of a certain age, you might have gotten to experience Pan Am Airlines. If not, you've seen the iconic videos and images of Pan Am in the 1960s and 70s. On this day in 1992, President George H.W. Bush orders 28,000 U.S. troops to Somalia. As we talk about Somalia here, this was sort of the beginning of the civil war in Somalia that unfortunately the country is still impacted by. The goal of the U.S. troops being sent there back in 92 to help with thousands of starving Somalis, humanitarian aid. Unfortunately, over time, there was U.S. mission creep, and then President Bill Clinton was elected. And during that time, there was a firefight, an attempt to take out a warlord in Somalia that led to the death of 18 Americans. You might remember Black Hawk Down, you might have seen the film Black Hawk Down. That immediately led the U.S. To bring back the troops from Somalia, and actually led to a reluctance throughout the 90s to ever send out U.S. troops on the ground. In particular, it impacted the decision-making around Rwanda. which, if you remember, the genocide in Rwanda, more than 1 million people killed in 100 days. One of the reasons the U.S. was reluctant, President Clinton was reluctant to send troops there to stop the killing, stopping the murder, was due to the aftermath of Somalia. And to end here with some lighter news, some pop culture music history on this day. On this day in 1969, Jay-Z is born. He turns 56 years old today.
Moshe, from the guy who brought us 30 is the new 20. 56 is the new 40?
Yeah, let's go with that. That's what Jay-Z, aka Sean Corey Carter, born Sean Corey Carter, would tell us. And one more piece of music news on this day. This day gave us Jay-Z, and this is also the day that we lost Led Zeppelin, at least as a band. They disbanded officially on this day in 1980.
All right. Well, we are not disbanding anytime soon, especially after everyone started tagging us with their Wrapped lists. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, we were totally ready to disband it, but then you guys sent us so many Wrap notes. They were like, "We're going to keep this. We're going to keep this group together.
We
for
might
another
have
year."
something here. I feel like we would do this podcast, Moshe, even if we weren't recording. We would just put a script together.
Jill, we did this podcast for many years without recording it. It was called Lunch.
Yeah, exactly. All right. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you do not miss an episode, and review us in the App Store. Those reviews really do help.
And if you see me around DC today, it's me. I'm here for the day. Have a speaking gig. Jill, I'll see you for one more edition this week, later tonight.
Moshe, we can't keep up.
Jill, there are weeks when actually it's a pretty aggressive travel. This is just a day trip to DC. We can manage it.
It was the DealBook conference. It threw me off.
That's right.
It felt like you were away.
It was 4 stops away on the subway, Jill.
All right, guys. See you tomorrow.